Our Brock Bowers, Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith, and Jigba main event team is going to win $1 million and other takeaways from week 9. That's what we're talking about today on Stealing Bears. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. Sean's written about this team a couple of times. We've talked about it on the show. Bowers comes back to a team where at the 2-3 turn we had Taylor and JSN, which is basically the perfect setup you could have at the 2-3 turn. Bowers comes back. We're hoping Bowers can do some stuff. He can make this team a real contender. And tight end premium, you were just saying to me, you're feeling a little greedy because you're upset that he was just shy of 50 points. Just shy. He didn't quite get to the big 5-0. But
there aren't too many 50-point performances out there, Ben.
No, I round up. If 49.3 is 50 in my brain. The 1999 stuff doesn't work on me mathematically for whatever reason. I'm always just like, that's $20. Like it's never really. This is 50 points. That's 50. I'm looking at a 5. 49.3. That's a 5 and a 0.
Oh, that's right. Game. Because he has 6 rushing yards as well in there. Whew. Then, I mean, when we talk about having, well, I had Bowers ranked as the 101 throughout the entire offseason. I did say take Jahmyr Chase first because you're going to want some Jahmyr Chase teams. Through most of this season, having a lot of Brock Bowers was going to kill you because he got hurt, right? He gets hurt at the end of week 1. We get 3/4 of a healthy Brock Bowers. He goes over 100 yards in that first game. When we talk about things like Bowers and Trey McBride being better than the GOATs at tight end, I mean, performances like, if anything, the 12, 127, and 3 line doesn't quite do it justice if you didn't get a chance to see it. At one point in this game, Mark Schlereth declared Brock Bowers his favorite player, but it's not that often that one of the commentators watching the game is just like, yeah, this guy's my favorite. I mean, it's not that unusual for Stealing Bananas, but you don't hear it on TV all that often.
No. Ridiculous one-handed TD catch on the back shoulder. I'm sure people have seen. My favorite part of that was the officials looking at each other and both being like, yep, that's incomplete. Definitely didn't get in bounds. And then they show the replay and it's like, no, he definitely did. The catch and run touchdown where we got to see the explosion back after the run, after the catch, run after the catch, whatever, that we have not gotten to see because of the PCL injury for several weeks. He catches a ball and just sort of, on one of those slants and tunnels through the middle of the field. We've seen that from mostly wide receivers, the way that they take off and run away from DBs. This is Brock Bowers. He's a tight end, for people who aren't aware. Also takes off and runs away from the DBs and scores. I mean, it's just so fun to have him healthy and doing cool stuff. It was a really, really fun game. He ends up scoring a third time late.
Where again, like his just superhuman athleticism compared to the defenders. Now, granted, that was one where you're kind of asking yourself, have they not learned their lesson to this point? He probably shouldn't be that wide open. But it gave you another good example after the 2 that you talked about, the incredible catch and then the incredible acceleration, where he also, even after the acceleration, he makes some nice cuts. He shows the vision. We talk about how Bowers had these insane evasion numbers in college, and he hasn't even really put up that much of that, even last year in the extraordinary rookie season. But his ability with the ball in his hands today, I mean, it just jumps off the page, right? But then the route running ability, the pure athleticism shows up on that touchdown. I was watching for that 2-point conversion because that it's like the touchdown was almost beside the point when they go for 2 to win the game. Like, this is the play that Brock Bowers is going to be quadruple teamed on. And he certainly did draw a lot of guys. Unfortunately, Geno's pass gets batted down there.
The receiver in the back of the end zone there, I'm not sure who, was it Thornton, number 17, was just wide open. And then it did get batted down, as you said.
An extraordinary game.
Tyler Lockett, number 17. I was like, who's 17 on the Raiders? I'm like, is that Devontae Adams? Is he back with the Raiders? Like, Tyler Lockett.
He had 1 target in this game, doesn't catch it. I don't know if bringing in Tyler Lockett was the key, but getting Brock Bowers back. And there were some questions about whether or not Chip Kelly would use him effectively. And certainly with him out, the offense has looked very, very poor. But I mean, Chip Kelly's probably not the greatest coach of all time, but this is what we were expecting, where if you have a healthy Brock Bowers, Chip Kelly is not the kind of guy who will like somehow not use him. And again, I mean, you lose the game at the end. Your passes batted down, but Geno Smith does look better. 39 attempts, goes for almost 300 with the 4 touchdowns. This offense, when it has all of its pieces, it wasn't a huge performance from Ashton Genty either, but you really liked what you saw from him, especially as a receiver.
Yeah, 5 catches, 47 yards, and a TD for him, all of which were second on the team. 5, 47, 1. You just said almost 300 yards and 4. I mean, Geno Smith is better in this game because of Brock Bowers. 127 yards and 3 touchdowns will go a long way to your passing line. The tactics in this game late, I thought were really interesting. A few weeks ago, I wrote at Stealing Signals for the readers. They know that, a lot of my intros aren't necessarily fantasy related. I've been fascinated by since the rule change in overtime, the preference to go second, which a lot of teams have done early this year. The preference has been because then we know if the first team scores what we need and we can go for it on 4th down if we need a touchdown and all of those things. I talked about this at length, but the big part of it that I thought was interesting, I thought people were missing because they were going back to that Chiefs Super Bowl, Chiefs Niners, where the Niners got the field goal, Chiefs scored a touchdown. That was it. It was in that Super Bowl because playoff games can't end in a tie. Time wasn't a factor. They had a 15-minute overtime period, and then you just go to another 15-minute period. And the 2 drives took the full 15 minutes. What we saw in the Cowboys-Packers tie a few weeks ago was even though both teams get a possession, the rule that supersedes that, as far as I understand it, is that there will be no second overtime. We're not in regulation. The game just ends.
And so you're kind of wondering as you watch this game, it's like, we've changed the rules so both teams get the ball. Do both teams get to finish their drive?
They don't. That's what happened to the Packers. Yeah. The Packers almost ran out of time, and they had a ball deflected and it landed with 1 second left. They kicked the field goal for the tie. But they were like, what are they doing? The announcers going, what are they doing? They don't know the rule. If that ball doesn't land in time, they don't get like an extra period. The 10 minutes are up. So the confusing thing for me is that when I was looking at the rules, and you can find like a short version, it's not obviously the full rule book, or maybe that's not obvious, but they have like listed online. The way that they write it in the NFL, like on the NFL website, it says both of those rules. Both teams will have a chance to possess the ball, and then also there will not be more than one period. So my question becomes, what happens if the first team that gets it possesses it for the full 10 minutes? Which my understanding is the will not be more than one period supersedes the both teams get the ball. So if you get the ball first and you run the whole 10 minutes, they don't even get a chance. And that's what I think is being missed with the we'll go
which
second.
Which is what the Packers actually just want to have happen to them in normal games.
All the time.
A chance to get the ball.
Exactly. So anyway, I thought it was very fascinating. The Jaguars, I think, were the first team this year to win the toss and elect to get the ball. And they went down and scored a touchdown, and it took them 7 minutes, and they kicked it back to the Raiders with only about 3 minutes left. And the Raiders, it doesn't end up mattering for the Raiders because they do get a DPI in the end zone, which gets the ball spotted down or like right outside the end zone. The ball gets spotted down to 2, and they still had 2 timeouts when they got down there. But they got into a situation where they were under a minute, and they also got a good kick return. We keep talking about the kick returns. Jaguars got a good kick return on their drive too, which made their drive, though it took 7 minutes, because that's the part of it is if your strategy is based around the scenarios where both teams score a touchdown, those are also the drives that take more than 5 minutes. You only have 10 minutes. If the team drives all the way down and scores a touchdown, and then the other team, So anyway, the Raiders had 3 minutes.
The drive that you're referring to was a 10-play, 44-yard, 6 minute and 30-second drive. I mean, only had to go 44 yards. Still ate up almost
all of it,
the entire overtime period.
And so the Raiders get to work with 2 timeouts and a 2-minute warning, but only about 3 minutes. And they do get pretty one-dimensional. They start throwing the whole time. They can't run their whole offense. They can't run the ball with Ginty because they're in a 2-minute drill now. And I do think that's a part of it that's not being thought about. Now, what I want to talk about with the tactics for people, I've already written about this a bunch. We've talked about it, I think, a little bit on the show. I don't want to get into like all of the other scenarios, but there's different scenarios. Certainly if the teams don't score, you want the ball first, because then you get the ball third. You go back to the Cowboys-Giants game, even with only 10 minutes, they wound up with 5 combined possessions. The Giants gave up ball to the Cowboys. Cowboys punted right away. Giants punted right away. Cowboys punted again. And then Russell Wilson threw a pick on the second play. Cowboys get their 3rd possession of the period. But when you start getting into those scenarios, the team that goes first gets an extra possession each time, and the Cowboys end up winning on a field goal on what was their 3rd possession of the period. The Giants only got 2 possessions, and they won the toss. And so that's just dumb. Like you've given up the other team the advantage by running more opportunities to score, and they win the game on that extra opportunity to score. But in this game, the fascinating thing that is like a next level thing, that is why I'm talking about this all over again. The other thing, other than knowing what you need when the team scores a touchdown, meaning you won't settle for a field goal, you know that you need to go for it on 4th down, that people talk about is if the other team scores a touchdown and gets an extra point, then you also know that when you score your touchdown, you can just go for 2. This sort of next level thing I was thinking about is, well, if the Jaguars win the toss and pick ball, part of my point about picking ball is you can dictate some stuff. You can move slow. You should move slow, because now you can dictate that you're going to take as much time off the clock as you can. And if you go score, you're going to make their life a lot more challenging. The other thing you could dictate is you can go for 2 on the first touchdown. I thought
you
Liam
can go for
Cohen
2 right when you score to start.
I thought Liam Cohen was going to, and he didn't, and they almost lost because of it. But that would be the one counter, is that the Raiders almost won this game on the 2-point conversion late. Why didn't the Jaguars just go for 2? Why don't they just be the team to go for 2?
Well, because there are scenarios where you would prefer to play defense on the 2-point conversion, or if they tie it, that you could still then, if the timing works out, you could have the additional possession. Now, less likely, obviously, in this particular instance where you've run so much time off the clock.
It doesn't seem like anyone's going to tie it on an extra point. So part of the reason I think the first team should go for 2 is then the best they can do is tie, like you're saying. Then you might still win it on the 3rd possession with a field goal if both teams get 8. It doesn't seem like the second team's ever going to not go for 2, because that just ties it, and there's only enough time left for the other team to then beat you with a field goal. I mean, every team, I think, if the first team kicks an extra point, second team is going to go for 2, which is why I think the first team should preempt that and go for 2.
Yeah, it's going to depend on score and
quality of offense,
full season tactics a little bit. Where, I mean, if the Raiders were 5-2 instead of 2-5, then maybe you take the tie right there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's an element of it as well. The other fascinating one where people are saying, you need to go. The other fascinating game was the 49ers Rams, which I believe was the one that happened right before I wrote about it. Rams won the toss and gave the ball to the Niners. Niners went down and got a field goal. Rams went down and got into a 4th and 1, went for it, got stuffed, game over. They lose. And in that case, you're like, you had to go for it. You're not kicking a field goal at this point with like 2 minutes left and giving the Niners a chance to then go win the game. All you can play for is either a tie or a loss at that point. You got to go for it to go try to win, but you didn't convert. And in a weird way, the Niners being the first one to go and having the 4th down decision where they could kick on the table was actually somewhat preferred. Not on a 4th and 1, but I was writing about it in a hypothetical. What if they were on a 4th and 10? Like, you'd actually want to be able to kick it, but at that point you can't, because then you're giving the 3rd possession back, because there's enough time on the clock, like 2 minutes left, that the Niners would then get a possession coming back to potentially beat you. So it's not just that you need. So the go for it on 4th thing works when the other team scores a touchdown, but when the other team does kick a field goal the first time, now you're in a position where you have a weird decision about kicking a field goal to tie, or you don't know that you need to go for it on 4th, but you sort of have to, because if you kick to tie, there's probably only going to be enough time for 3 possessions, and now your opponent's the one getting 2 of those 3 possessions. So you got to score. You have to go score a touchdown now, even though they kicked a field goal. Anyway,
and the changes with field position also matter on that, because it's just so difficult to put them in a situation where you're going to force an easy 3 and out and be in great position yourself, just where you are there on the field. As you mentioned, in this overtime, both of the possessions started on the opponent's side of the field. As you're talking about this whole thing, Bennett, and as we get to the other, fascinating game here, or super silly game,
yeah, I said it was the best game of the year, of the week. You were like, that game was ridiculous. I think we had a different vibe on it, but
so when the season started, did you have in your bold predictions that both Russell Wilson and Joe Flacco would set a career high in passing yards? Single game?
I did not have that. Before we go to that game, we should go to that game. Cam Little hit a 68-yarder in the Jaguars Raiders game. Never wrong, just early, Shawn. 68-yarder. That was awesome.
This would have been a good week to still have him, because he did play a big role in this game. And it wasn't quite as early as in the 70-yarder in the preseason. And I mean, again, you can kind of tell what's going to happen, but he hits that. And not that long after he hits it, his holder is immediately arms up. This is going through. That ball was crushed. And it didn't just sneak over.
The little one, you were saying that wasn't very close. It cleared it by more than a little bit. Schlereth was like baffled by the play. You were just talking about Schlereth is my least favorite color commentator in the league, but I hate him so much that sometimes it's just enjoyable to hear the nonsense.
He's my favorite because we share the same favorite player.
But he's watching the replay, and he's like trying to figure out what he wants to say about how it was good from something. He's like, that's good from 70. It's 2 yards longer than what it was actually good from. I mean, I get his point. It wasn't like you could say it was good from 80, but like you could have at least said 70, I don't know, 73 or something. Like it was a little bit, it was clear by 5 yards. He could have said it was clear by 5 yards. He's like, that's good from 70. He made a 70-yarder in preseason. Anyway, the Bears-Bengals game, Shawn, I called this the game of the year to you, and you kind of laughed and said that, I mean, it was the most ridiculous game ever. And it was. It was an absurd football game. The Bengals take the opening kickback for a touchdown. The Bears more or less outplayed them from that point. I mean, the Bengals looked good. We get T. Higgins, like really good T. Higgins. We don't have this massive disparity in Chase and Higgins targets that we've had over the last couple of weeks. We get a lot more balance, and Higgins making some fantastic plays downfield. His touchdown was both of his touchdowns were incredible. But the Bears really looked a lot better offensively out of the bye against the Bengals' brutal defense, I felt, throughout the game. And we're basically the better team, but the Bengals get a free 7 points at the beginning of the game, or not free, they earned it with a kick return touchdown. And then they stick
also
around.
Threw for 449 yards.
I know, that's what's crazy.
In terms of saying the Bears were the better team, I mean, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
Because I at this point, I just don't think it's an exaggeration to say, and obviously, I'm not, too worried about hyperbole, but I just don't think it's that inappropriate to say that this Bengals defense is the worst defense of my lifetime.
It's terrible.
You're watching this game, and isn't the thing that jumps out to you is you're like, shouldn't the Bengals onside kick just every time?
I mean, maybe. So I want to get to the end, but I want to break down the game as well. But we get to a point. Sort of the reason I was saying the Bears were better, and you're right, the Bengals offense was good too, is just from that opening kick where they get a 7-0 lead, the Bears go on a 41-20 run. If that's that's more of a basketball run, but they outscored them 41-20 from the opening kick from 11 seconds into the game to two minutes left in the game. The Bengals are now down 13 with 2 minutes left in the game, and they get the dream sequence that you can get, which is you stick around late enough, you get the touchdown. I'm sorry, I'm saying 13. They were down 14. They get the touchdown. They go for 2 on the first touchdown because that's what you're supposed to do. The math says when you're down by 14, they convert that, cut it to 6, get the onside kick, and get the other TD and kick the extra point with under a minute left, get the 15 points and take the lead by 1. I mean, they executed it perfectly
And
And
they
then
should have
Colston
onside
Loveland. And then
I mean, there was no chance the Bears weren't going to score.
There was really not.
Frankly, with like 45 seconds or whatever, they could have just handed off to Kyle Monongai twice and they would have scored.
It was there was definitely a vibe of, oh, they scored too quick. They did all of that too quick. They scored the first touchdown with a minute 43, and they had already scored the second touchdown.
Who didn't watch this, right, Ben? There's a point in this game where Josevach catches the touchdown that would have let him start that series and is out the back of the end zone for no particular reason. And so they end up not converting. And we have all these images of him over on the sideline as the GOAT. And then, within like 10 minutes, he scores the go-ahead touchdown. I mean, there were crazy twists and turns even before where you started there, where it really looked to me like the ruling of who had the pick here. We got a pick from Tremaine Edmonds, right? Takes it all the way back, but then is ruled down. And I mean, was there contact there? I mean, that looked like pick six.
I didn't really. So I was watching the cut-ups when I went through this game, like the condensed game, and they on the condensed game they only showed one replay, and I was like, that didn't seem like there was contact, but I'm just assuming that they had a different angle that showed that there was. Did you see other angles and you didn't think there was really contact?
I didn't see it.
They must have had an angle. This
it seemed like that ruling, right? Which again, they have the ability to do replay on those, but that was going to actually cost the Bears the game because they have a 27-second 3 and out, followed by a 32-second touchdown, and then a 49-second touchdown, and then they get a 37-second touchdown. Then
coming back.
If you watched the Panthers-Packers game early in the day, and you were thinking, I might never watch a football game again, this was the far opposite end of the spectrum, where teams were like, you know what we should do is we should only try and stop plays at the line of scrimmage. Any play across the line of scrimmage immediately goes for a touchdown.
We love
so much better football.
It was so fun. We love to complain about the volume of possessions in modern games. A lot of them only have like 8 possessions for each team. We've had some games where we're like, both teams only got 7 possessions in the whole game. The average tends to be 11-ish. It is, wrote about this recently at the newsletter recently as well. It is down this year. It is an all-time low, at least as far as Pro Football Reference has drive data, which goes back to 1998. Last year was an all-time low at like 10.7, and we're down to like 10.4 or something per team per game. This game had 10 drives in the fourth quarter, 5 each for each team. So a pace of like 20 drives for each team. It also had in the second quarter, which was also nonsense, there was 8 drives. I mean, these guys actually had a lot of fun out there running, having a lot of different drives and running a lot of different plays. And it wasn't one of those games where there was only 7 drives on each side, like you said, because teams they were scoring so quickly. We have a bunch of 3-play, 4-play drives.
Ben, do you know how many times the Green Bay Packers punted today in a game they lost 16-13?
It's 9.
0.
Oh.
7 possessions.
I took the bait the wrong direction. I didn't really think about that.
7 possessions, 0 punts, lost 16-13.
I was thinking, did the Panthers punt in that game? A couple times, 3 times. So that was the game with only 7 possessions. That game sucked. That game was terrible. It was windy. Bryce Young threw multiple passes that just the spiral broke halfway through, and it was like it's a duck. It just starts fluttering. The one he tried to throw,
and there was a play
to
call
Xavier
today
Legette,
where Oh, you're talking about Bryce Young. There was a play today from Jordan Love where the play call is that he throws deep into double coverage. That ball was intercepted by a third man.
Yeah, by
as a punt.
10 yards away from the other guys. Yeah, as a punt. Yeah, no, so the one where he tried to throw it back across the field and the Panthers defender that probably could have had a pick six dropped it. I got that shared in the Signals Gold Discord chat. That was, somebody was joking that was something on Twitter. It was that where it was shared. The tweet was saying that this was maybe one of the worst passes of all time or something because he chucked it across the field, and then that person had followed it up by saying it might not have been his worst pass of the game because he underthrew that deep ball that you're describing. And I responded to the people in the chat. It's funny because I think Bryce Young threw two passes worse than either of Jordan Love's passes in this game. The one where he was trying to throw the fade to Xavier Legette, the safety catches it like 5 yards to the field side. When you're throwing a fade, and so Greg Olsen's trying to break it down. He's like, you have to put this in the corner of the end zone where only your guy can get it or no one else can get it. And he's like, Greg Olsen's like never at a loss for words for trying to explain what happened. He's like, I don't really know what happened. It's like, it's 5 to 10 yards into the field and it's just fluttering. And then the other one he was trying to throw was a corner out to Ted McMillan, who's wide open. And it just goes like way higher and behind him. And again, flutters up over his head. And there was a third one where he tried to throw an out route, couldn't drive it into the wind. His receiver, I think it was Jimmy Horn, fell down. And so they didn't really talk about that one. The announcers are just like, oh, the receiver fell down. But it was another ball that broke spiral halfway and started fluttering. And it's like, he doesn't have the arm strength to throw into the wind. At least Jordan Love has arm strength. Like when he threw the ball back across the field, and it should have been picked and returned back for a touchdown, probably. I mean, he drove it through the wind. He just was being a little bit nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I like Bryce Young, and I think that some of this stuff has been overstated. And I mean, this is a huge win for the Panthers. I mean, you've mentioned that it seemed like the Panthers coaching staff had packed it in some of their losses. I think that Dave Canales is just doing a pretty decent job of being like stoic and calm over there on the sidelines because they're now 5-4 despite having almost nothing to work with. The 11 for 20 for 102 yards and a pick in the victory today from Bryce Young. And as you're mentioning, I mean, some of his passes just looked head over heels because the spiral broke so badly. It was a little bit tough. If you were rooting for Tetairoa McMillan, you weren't getting much. He was the only receiver who caught more than one pass, which, again, when you complete 11 total, that's going to happen. Rico Dowdle
completed 11 passes in that game?
In the victory. Yeah. In a game where the Packers, again, did not punt. Ben, you were telling me about, and we're not going to go into this in huge detail on this show because we've done it a bunch in a variety of ways, and we just have too much stuff that actually happened this week to talk about. But the running backs sort of don't matter discussion is always interesting from the perspective of how are you looking at it. And one of the very first pieces, probably the thing that started all of the discussion, was an article by the Fantasy Douche back, more than a decade ago, where he breaks down how the strong play from Marshawn Lynch, it's very easy to show, is actually hurting the Seattle Seahawks at that time. Josh Jacobs.
They were running as a result, and the runs were not effective. I mean, they weren't as effective as the passes, and it was actually hurting the offense by pushing them toward more run play. And when he was off the field, they were a better offense statistically.
And this is even a pretty good game by Josh Jacobs standards, where 17 for 87 scores a touchdown. The Packers just have to create a different identity. Now, to say that, I mean, they're 5-2-1. They're still fine because the Detroit Lions really looked like they were missing Ben Johnson today. But man, when you're the Green Bay Packers, you cannot lose a home game here to the Carolina Panthers, in part because now, and again, you can look at the individual efficiency from Josh Jacobs and say, yeah, he played well. What more do you want? But what you want is you have to have a game style in which there are more possessions if you're the better team. You cannot get pulled into, and on the defensive side, right? You hold the Panthers to 11 for 20. I mean, you dominate Bryce Young. You have this defense where you have Micah Parsons. You have all of those things. You cannot allow Rico Dowdle to somewhat successfully rush 25 times. You cannot get one sack because, again, the tactics are not so much about the individual plays. They're about creating enough possessions. And I know that everyone, and I say everyone, that a lot of people are going to talk about the turnovers, right? You make some big mistakes in the game, but the whole point is that if you're the far better team, you have to have enough possessions to overcome your mistakes for the same reasons that you have to do that in other sports where you're the better team. You cannot have such a short game that you lose because of some mistakes.
The moment in this game that really exemplified that is early second quarter. It's only 3-0. They are winning 3-0. Jordan Love hits Christian Watson for a 52-yard gain on a deep ball. The wind is not terrible at this point. He threw a pretty good deep ball the play prior to Matthew Golden, who kind of had to dive for it, got his hands on it. This was, I mean, or maybe it was just they were the direction they were heading or what, because this was actually right after the Bryce Young interception I was describing to Xavier Legette, but before some of the other shenanigans that went on later. Immediately after that deep ball, they run the ball with Josh Jacobs 3 straight times, and he does get a first down. But that deep ball got them all the way to the Carolina 30. 5 plays later, and 5 actual plays and 2 penalties, 2 false starts later, they kick a field goal from the 31. So they went 5 plays to go backward a yard, or 7 plays if you count the penalties as plays, to go backward a yard and kick a field goal. The only 2 dropbacks go for a sack and an incomplete pass to Emmanuel Wilson, the backup running back. They don't even get another pass attempt to any of the wide receivers or tight ends. They just run, and then, eventually get behind the sticks, mostly because of the penalty. But to your point, I mean, you hit a team with a 52-yard. I just, as soon as they did that handoff, I was like, you knew that was coming. I was watching that right after that big pass, and I was like, just keep throwing right now. You let the defense off the hook a little bit right there to just run it up the middle with Josh Jacobs 3 straight times, even as they are effective runs. It's like all Matt LaFleur wants to pass for is to open up the defense so that he can give the ball to Josh Jacobs.
You mentioned that disastrous pass from Young to Legette that gets intercepted. But this, again, is a game where the Panthers win 16-13, despite the fact that they had a 15-play, 70-yard, 8-minute, and 40-second drive that ate up, obviously, a massive chunk of the first half that didn't even result in points. So it's not just the Packers who have some drives here that don't quite work out. Frustrating to have Matthew Golden go out. Heartbreaking, obviously, to have Tucker Kraft go out after the game that he had a week ago. Tucker Kraft has been one of the best stories in football this year. Unfortunately, we continue to get some heartbreaking injuries. We kind of had moved away from it because of the way that these 2 games contrast, Ben. But before we get completely on to other things, you mentioned those T. Higgins touchdown receptions. Those were absolutely crazy. 14 targets for Chase Brown in this game. And he does have a couple of drops, but he also goes 8 for 75 and made some big plays late.
A lot of those came late as well. I mean, Flacco loves to throw to the running backs, but you get a little bit of the, come from behind, defenses dropping in to prevent defense. There was a stretch where I think he caught like 3 passes in a row on one of those, comeback drives. They had an interception. You mentioned that right before the 27-second punt. The Bengals have an 8-play interception drive down 14, and then they have the 4-play touchdown drive, 6-play touchdown drive. Haven't looked through all and they had a missed field goal on their drive prior to that. You go back and look through those. I'll bet you Chase Brown's 14 targets are overwhelmingly represented in those final 4 drives.
And obviously there are some situational elements. There are some tactical things. It is cool to think, though, of Joe Flacco and the different things that he brings to the table and the different abilities he has to go to different guys if the situation dictates. Obviously, he's been peppering Jahmyr Chase with targets since he got to Cincinnati last week, notably 19 targets for Chase. The next closest man was at 3. And then he follows that up with a game where we have the epic T. Higgins performance and a 14 target game for Chase Brown, that is. And even within that, you have another strong performance from Jahmyr Chase himself. You can have these situations here where teams completely control the clock against the Bengals, but it's more fun when they just let the opposing team score instantly. So you can have games like this. Colson Loveland was one of the players that we bid really high on in one key league to try and get across the gap with Brock Bowers. That didn't really work because Loveland didn't score in that. But we have Cole Kmet go down in this game. And I mean, this is probably the arrival game for Colston Loveland. It'll probably bounce back and forth a bit, but then this was a 3-target, 0-catch game from Rome Odunze based on where he was drafted, based on the struggles from the other receivers. Now, DJ Moore actually did quite a few pretty crazy things in this game. But with Luther Burden out, with Olamide Zaccheaus actually leading in targets, does this feel like a one-off to you, or does it feel like a situation where Colston Loveland now? I mean, and again, I say this within the context of I don't think that Colston Loveland looks remotely like Tyler Warren, and certainly not like Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. I don't think that's fair to really put him in that category, even with where he was drafted. But it does seem like now he's going to be more of an engine of this offense.
I like that take. Before I jump into that, I said it very clunky, but I just did add it up. Those 4 drives I was referencing for the Bengals, there was 31 plays combined, 10 of Chase Brown's targets on those 31 plays. The Odunze game, I thought you were going to ask me about the Odunze game from the perspective of when you were saying this is a one-off. And obviously that's been an issue for him for a bit now, where he has struggled to bring in catchable balls for a while now. Even when he was playing well, we talked about this a little bit, and I've written about it as a concern. He has a tough play on an end zone target in the third quarter where I would have expected a catch for a touchdown there. One of his other targets was catchable as well, if I'm not mistaken. 3 catchless targets is not great for a guy that, and pretty much everybody who has him in fantasy is playing him because he's been putting up a lot of numbers. DJ Moore has a good game. His usage continues to be very unique. He throws a touchdown on a Philly special. He catches a wheel route out of the backfield for a big game. He's been doing some of the backfield stuff. He gets an end-around TD run where he fights through contact down inside the 5-yard line for a touchdown. Really fun play there. You mentioned he had some fascinating plays today. Still only gets 6 targets, 4 catches, 72 yards. Because he's not doing a lot in the flow of the actual offense. As you mentioned, Olamide Zaccheaus seems to be the guy that does all of that now. I mean, 8 targets, 6 catches, either lead or tie for the team lead on both those categories, with Loveland, who has 7 targets, 6 catches. I think the answer to what you're saying, and the reason I'm answering it by talking about the receivers, is yes. It is actually, I think I'd go further than it feels like you did with Loveland. I thought he looked great. We've been talking about him not playing well. I thought he looked good. I wrote in my notes, he's starting to look like a first-round pick for the first time when he scores the TD on the slant out wide after he had multiple big catches down the field earlier before he hits on the game winner, which is such a signature moment in a season and for a team. He goes out there, catches that pass, breaks a tackle, runs away from DBs as well. I mean, similar to what we're talking about with Bowers, not on the same level, obviously. He gets a little bit more space of a head start. But for a second, you're like, is he going to get caught? And then you're like, no, he's not going to get caught. And it's not really going to be close. He's athletic. I mean, he can get going. That was an impressive play. And with under 30 seconds left to go get that play as a rookie coming out of the bye, a couple weeks out of the bye now or whatever. But I mean, this is This is I think you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. That kind of a performance where it's really hard for me to imagine how he doesn't have a much bigger role going forward from this game. And what I was saying about going further than what you were saying, because that sounded like what you were saying, but going further is maybe he doesn't look like Warren and Bowers and McBride, but I thought he looked really good. I thought I was like, this is what a first round tight end is supposed to look like. And he looks sweet.
And you gave me a hard time, and I think justifiably so, about where I was ranking Caleb Williams early in the season in terms of fantasy QB. But you see more again today of what makes it a compelling play, right? Where, I mean, he scores a ton of points because he rushes 5 times for 53 yards. The touchdown catch that he has is not his only catch. They decided, I mean, the Packers don't want to run any plays, and the Bears are trying to figure out how many receptions they can get their quarterback. So we have different philosophies out there.
That second play was cool. They brought Tyson Bagent on. They did a 2 quarterback formation, and it was a double pass where Caleb throws it back to Bagent. And it's like, oh, Bagent's going to throw downfield, but he throws back across the field to Caleb. You got 2 quarterbacks. You use them. You use Caleb's athleticism as basically it ends up being a wide receiver screen on the other side of the field. He runs up the sideline for like 15 yards. I mean, it's a cool play design. Ben Johnson's always got stuff in his bag of tricks.
Ben Johnson is awesome. It is entertaining because you almost get the vibe here that he's like, well, if he refuses to run, I'm going to make him catch passes, right? Because Caleb Williams likes to run right up to the line of scrimmage and then refuse to run across it and throw some crazy sidearm 50-yard pass that doesn't do anything. You're like, just run. And I mean, he has 283 and 3 today, but he also has 75 yards from scrimmage through the ground and the air with a touchdown. A massive, massive fantasy day. And it's also pretty entertaining because the 2 passes to him were so perfectly executed, and you wonder how a team that has so much to deal with has time to even practice all that stuff, because you do also get the funny call at the end of this game that has been like every single Bears game where the commentator's like, lots of procedural stuff for these guys. Like they can't run the normal plays, but they've really practiced well all of the trick plays, which again is fun for us when we get to talk about these games. And then, I mean, again, it's kind of like the Rico Dowdle performances, maybe arguably until today, where Dowdle looked fantastic again. You're playing against the you're playing against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, but Monongai 2 yards short of 200 from scrimmage, and I mean, just looks like a wrecking ball out there. He's not going to, win any sprints, but runs really hard. I kind of think he's the guy who should just be the starter for them. You can certainly work DeAndre Swift when he's healthy in quite a bit, but it's shockingly not that bad of a 1-2 punch when you think about just what it looks like on paper coming into the season.
It's really not. I was writing about it a little bit this weekend on Saturday, just some of his profile stuff, digging back into it. He had over 0.3 missed tackles forced per touch in 2023 on 250 touches. It's a really strong number. He makes guys miss. He was at 0.25-ish in 2024, but still not bad. I was comparing it a little bit to Woody Marks because I've talked about both of them as being not necessarily great prospects. Marks is a guy whose missed tackles forced per touch numbers are like down in the 0.15 to 0.17 range, like half of Monongai's best years. The difference, not necessarily between them, but the issue with Monongai is what I should say is that he is an older back and has a poor, athleticism score. He's not a guy that looks like he's got a ton of juice necessarily. He doesn't have is it the jumps and the explosion numbers that weren't very good for him? I'm trying to remember it right now as I'm talking about it. But he's got decent agility, but no, sorry, he's got some burst, but not his agility numbers were horrible. Is that right?
And I think that you see that a bit in the overall profile and why, a Rutgers team would want to use him that way in college. But in this game, again, you see the 3 for 22. Now it's on 5 targets. I'm not sure if those are going to be labeled as catchable or not. But some of that stuff with a guy who has the otherwise strong rushing numbers is just going to be the play design, the scheme that you were in college. Now, again, we would definitely prefer to see that. But one of the issues that you run into with Woody Marks and LaQuint Allen is that it's kind of the opposite direction on the scheme, where when you dig into their numbers top to bottom, it really looks like it was just the scheme doing things for them. Now, that's not to say that guys couldn't succeed and we would be rooting against them, because we always want everyone to do well within the context of hopefully not the week they're playing us for all the marbles perhaps. But this was another week where Marks wasn't able to do much for the Texans. But again, the context there was that CJ Stroud gets knocked out early on the type of hit that the Houston Texans have argued many times should be allowed. So
right.
Then
no, but I was getting off on a tangent on Monongai, but I just wanted to say that I thought he looked awesome. To your point, he looked awesome against the Bengals. And I think that lack of athleticism and like the limited burst and stuff, I guess I just wanted to say that I think in this matchup it really fit. You see this awesome game. He can make guys miss. He makes guys miss. And then the Bengals are just giving him space in addition to that. So it's the thing we used to always talk about with Najee Harris, where he can make guys miss but maybe not get yardage. But Monongai got a lot of yardage in this game, in part because you're playing against the Bengals, right? Like there's space to get to. And then it's not as difficult maybe to make guys miss. And so I thought he had a great game for sure. It's notable that DJ Moore gets one carry and it goes for a 17-yard TD, that Britton Brown comes on. And I mean, that's a made up name. 5 carries, 37 yards and a TD, 22-yard rushing touchdown right away after he comes on the field. And I don't know who Britton Brown is. Like it's
a good made up name. It's one you would make up for yourself.
Yeah.
If you need to start a second Substack, Britton Brown might be your handle.
It's better than Germany green or like France fuchsia or something. I mean, we're just throwing European countries with alliterative colors is, I guess, the theme here. And then you mentioned Caleb.
The thing with Monongai, though, too, is that unlike Najee Harris, he actually keeps the momentum going toward the other team's end zone. Where with Pacheco, with Harris, there's a lot of athleticism, but the feet get stopped, and they get stopped for a long period of time, which you simply can't do against NFL players. That's a guy not that athletic, but he continues to drive toward the opposing end zone.
That's a good point.
Obviously, is the goal.
Yeah, he does. He goes downhill. He falls forward. He fights through contact. All those things. I just think it's fascinating that he has 176 rushing yards. The rest of his team has over 100 in the same game. When a guy has a 200-yard rushing game, he's usually the whole rushing offense. Like. It does.
When a guy has almost 200 yards from a scrimmage as a running back, do you normally point out and be like, this team gained 576 yards from scrimmage? Maybe because you already have 200 baked in.
Right.
But often that will kill the game. Speaking of a game that... So some of it is just personal bias in terms of who we enjoy watching, but I would make the claim that the 18-15 Broncos victory over the Texans today was sort of the opposite of Packers-Panthers, even though obviously there are some similarities there. Would you go in that direction as well, or would you have some of the same problems with this game that we had with Packers-Panthers?
I'd have to have the same problems with the Packers. There was not a lot of offense early. I thought Nix was not clean early in this game. He threw a tough early pick on a ball that he underthrew by quite a lot. He missed Evan Ingram for a potential 30-yard TD right before half on an out and up, where I'm sure you were thinking Evan Ingram maybe try to go catch that with two hands because you love when guys just jump and try to use one hand, but it was well over his head. He did hit Sutton for a touchdown on the very next play.
Well, it was certainly one where you're looking at it like, that's not the shape you have to use on that pass. But it's also one where as soon as it was the wrong passing shape, Evan Ingram stops and then he just lunges with one hand. It's like,
do something different.
Run under the ball. You don't stop and then jump up and swat at it. But no, it was interesting here because Bo Nix does actually push the ball deep a ton in this game. And most of those plays, like most of their deep passes throughout the course of the year, fail in one way or another. But certainly there were some opportunities here where the guys actually were open and just didn't target or didn't trigger early enough and the play would have worked. And yet we get into the fourth quarter and you can't stop Bo Nix in the fourth quarter somehow.
No.
I mean, I don't know why the fourth quarter would be so different from the other three quarters, because you can stop him easily in the other three.
I do think it has something to do with playing with a little tempo, because he looked better in the 2-minute drill for a couple of completions as well. But then I think he threw a pick. But you get a little tempo going, and you get a little bit of that, like, under the gun, timing issue. Anyway, there may be a reason for it. Maybe Sean Payton should get into that.
It's either a thing where, you can make the argument in either direction, right? Where the Broncos either come into these games with a bad script. They're not one of these teams where like, oh, the first 15 plays, they look great. And then the rest of the way, they don't, know what they're doing. They haven't practiced the stuff. The first 15 plays, you're like, call 15 different plays. But by the end of the game, Sean Payton usually has the defense on its heels, and or Nix is playing with more athleticism, right? When they start off the game, he has these short drops. He's throwing out of the pocket from a stance that it's not unathletic, but it's nonchalant in a weird way where you're like, maybe you shouldn't have Bo Nix throw from the pocket.
Right.
When he gets out on the edge, things start to get a lot different. Now he, threw late and underthrew some passes out there as well. But we also had some opportunities, some situations in this game where, some of the earlier drives would have been extended if Nix had run. And then again in the fourth quarter, similar to when they scored the 30 points against the Giants, in the fourth quarter, he's using his legs, and it also helps. And he ends up with a 3 for 36 in this game. It's also hilarious when we went back and forth on whether or not to play RJ Harvey on our teams, and finally decided, he's not going to play much, but if he takes a few of these Marvin Mims plays and just scores a touchdown, it's like RJ Harvey only scores touchdowns. The play that he scores on too was that prototypical one that you guys love to talk about, where it's a wheel route, runs a great route where it's not just one where he wanders out and runs up the field, but at the point where he passes the defender, puts a move on him, beats him by, he's completely wide open. And Bo Nix is like, what I like is when my guy is uncovered in the end zone. It's like, that's a pass that we're all familiar with, we could make from college. You drop that one in there, and 5 for 51, a touchdown for RJ Harvey. Maybe use him a little bit more. It was interesting here. The final line doesn't look that great for Dobbins, but especially when you consider how good the Houston Texans defense is, he was running pretty effectively throughout most of this game.
Yeah, he looked good. You could contrasted this from the Packers and Panthers, and when you asked me about the punts and Packers Panthers, I drastically overestimated. How many punts do you think the Broncos had in this game?
7.
I believe it was 8. I believe I think I'm counting the drives. It's quite 8 punts. They almost had the 9 that I said, and the Texans also had 8 punts. So it wasn't the same as the Packers Panthers, but it was equally miserable. The second half of this, by the way, we're talking about things getting better. I'm going to read both teams' possessions in sequence in the second half. Punt, field goal, punt, 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 touchdown, punt, 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 field goal. Game over. That was
one of the reasons I love this game is that there were first of all, there were a lot of possessions, which I think you kind of have to like, regardless of how bad the possessions are. 27 possessions, only 2 of them went over 5 minutes, and none of them hit 8 minutes. Just short possessions. Short possessions is really all I'm asking
plays.
For. Yeah.
Well, 3 plays and a punt. No, but
but I would prefer a 3 and out to a 15-play, 80-yard, 10-minute field goal drive.
I agree.
It's like after you've held the ball for a certain period of time, you should be required to score a touchdown or you get no points.
To answer anyone's question that's listening about how Bo Nix could have played well in the fourth quarter when there was all those punts, the touchdown drive was an 8-play, 61-yard drive for the Broncos, where he did hit Harvey on that wheel route, deep pass for a touchdown. It was an impressive throw. Several other good completions on that drive for him. Troy Franklin, very involved. Up with the first 15 plays, he got a bunch of early targets, and he got several more throughout the game. He had a couple catches on that touchdown drive. Then they did have a few 3-and-outs, a couple 3-and-outs, and then an 8-play punt drive in between there, but we're also holding the Texans to punt so they continue to rack up opportunities. The play on the last field goal drive I really liked. They get the ball back with 50 seconds left. They're at their own 36. They get a 3-yard pass to Harvey. You mentioned Nick's used his legs. He rolls out right, sets his feet, and you could tell that he was sort of setting up the defense. He could see that he had a lot of space back left. He starts to climb the pocket while still kind of looking forward, just kind of holding the linebackers that are sort of spying him a little bit until the last possible moment, and then just breaks back through. There's some room in the pocket. The offensive line picked up the defensive line well, and he basically ran diagonally back through the middle of the pocket and then into that space back on the left side, because it was one of those half boots like out to the right, and he's planted back on the right side of the field, and the routes all then flood to the right, and the DBs are flooding to the right, and he diagonally runs back across the field to the left, scrambles for 25 yards after all these series of punts from both teams. And mind you, both of these teams have great defenses. I mean, we expected this to be a low-scoring game. I believe it had the lowest over-under on the week. Texans lose CJ Stroud in this game as well. Maybe that leads to a little bit too much, like a little bit of a conservative mindset from Sean Payton on the play calling side, because they're not necessarily getting pushed by Davis Mills on the other side. But they get to the situation with a minute left where they've had multiple punts in a row. They need to get something going, and Nix creates the big play with his legs. I thought it was a really good play.
He looked good. I mean, we now have 2 weeks out of the last 3 where Troy Franklin has double-digit targets, a ton of air yards, and basically does nothing. It was at least vaguely humorous that when he converts the 2-point conversion to tie them at 15, he gets up and wants to get after the defender as if he's not just having another game with like 200 air yards and no actual yards. But the 2-point conversion catch was nice. It was extremely important. It gets this game tied at 15. They do go on to win. It was unfortunate because Stroud had made some decent plays early. They were able to get Nico Collins going a bit in this game. He doesn't get in the end zone, but he has 7 for 75. But it was a tricky play that he gets injured on, because he does slide late, and the defender does make a real effort on the hit to avoid his head. And as a result, hits him very cleanly and hard in the torso and drives his head into the turf as a result of that. And you get the concussion. And this is one of the reasons why I don't agree with the Texans' argument on some of their hits in the past. Certainly, just because they've argued that you should be able to do these hits is in no way, shape, or form saying that CJ Stroud deserves to get hurt or that anybody should get hurt. I sort of felt like, even though it was quote unquote a late slide and the defender did a nice job of avoiding the head, that he still also could have avoided the hit entirely. And that even though technically you can pick up the flag, which they did, and was kind of a gutsy call after a player has left with an injury, that they probably should have not done that, in part because we want the guys healthy. That's the reason the rules are in place. It wasn't an egregiously late slide. I don't know.
But it was.
I guess I would like to see it. I don't blame the defender. At the same time,
Yeah.
I'd like to see the flag just so that we can continue to work in the direction of cleaning up the game and not creating this gray area of like, can we still actually hit him on this kind of play?
I would agree with everything you just said. My minor addition would be just to say that I think you're saying this as well, that there's a distinction between this play and like some of the Texans hits that have annoyed us in the past. Like when I think it was Azeez Al-Shaair just basically tried to take Trevor Lawrence's head off last year when he's clearly sliding. And then they're like, oh, it's late. And it's like, no, you're trying to hurt him. You're trying to prove a point here. This one, Stroud's running on a third down, and he gets 2 yards shy of the first down marker, and he gets caught in between. I really want to go get this first down, and I should be getting down. And he decides really late. Like this was a very late slide, and it was an awkward slide as a result, because he's so close to the marker on a third down. And it's the competitiveness element. And I think if, he went and looked back on it, he would say the same. Like, I just got caught, between doing two things.
It's also
physically.
a little bit of a weird one because he's trying to actually slide in front of the guy in front of him. And the hit that gets him actually comes from the side. And so in terms of him timing the slide, it's kind of timed to the guy in front of him, not this guy coming at him almost from a blind area.
Yeah. It's tricky. Stroud's a guy that we obviously really do root for on the show and have always really liked. I did think this was one that, and I agree with you, we should be overly protective of the quarterbacks. There's people that are like, oh, you're ruining the game. Now, what ruins the game is when we have to watch terrible quarterback play, and there's just not a lot of good quarterbacks. And it's not just that passing is the only thing that matters. It's that you need passing to force defenses to play certain ways. It opens up the whole sport. You do not want seasons like 2017 when all the QBs got hurt. It's terrible. It's not fun to watch football every week.
Well, and the other thing too, just kind of going with that, is that when you hit the sliding quarterback, that is one that has a really high risk of causing concussions, which is, again, I think something that people very legitimately are concerned about just globally. That, I mean, this is a huge health concern when you lay that hit. And, beyond just that we want to see the QBs healthy for good football, is we want to see the people healthy for good lives.
That's right. That's 100%. 100% well said. We were talking a little bit about some of the coaching decisions. There were several this week that piqued my interest. DeMeco Ryans in this game chose to kick a field goal on 4th and 1 from the 20 with 1:55 in the half. And this was one that I'm going to write up this week, and I wanted to mention because one of the things with going for it sometimes is even if you get it, you might still wind up settling for a field goal on that drive. And so you're like, was it even worth the risk? Because we were in this weird intermediate range where the field goal make percentage is still very high, and we weren't actually that close to where if we get it, we're likely to score a touchdown. I want to highlight this one because there's 1:55 in the half. If you get it, even if you do wind up kicking a field goal again, the Broncos only had one timeout at this point. You can probably take away the final drive of the half from your opponent. And so the decision to kick a field goal on a 4th and 1 to me in this spot was a pretty poor decision. Of course, the way that it worked out, I have to mention.
How many more drives do you think occurred?
Yeah, they made the field goal. The Broncos failed to get anywhere. They punted. The Texans failed to get anywhere. Punted. The Broncos fumbled the punt return, and the Texans got another field goal after it. So they got 6 points anyway.
Which I think DeMeco Ryans would have you include all of that in your article.
Yeah, I think he'd want that. So my point would be when you kick the field goal there, and part of the reason with the field goals with the field position coming back that's mentioned a lot, you leave 1:55 in the half and better field position off a kickoff and the potential for them to go make a field goal coming back, say the 35, right? And so now, starting at the 35, they might go get a field goal coming back. You've now matched them at the end of this half. We've both made a field goal. If we go for it at the 20 and don't get it, there's an increased likelihood that the Broncos don't actually get a field goal coming back with 2 minutes left, and you still have matched them in a scenario where you don't convert. You both get 0 before half, right? But scenario where you do convert, you potentially kick the field goal and don't allow them a field goal coming back, so you're net +3, or you do go and score the touchdown, right? That's the other, obviously, payoff. I just thought the different outcomes made it very clear that on 4th and 1, they should have went there. DeMeco Ryans obviously playing 4D chess ends up getting +6 out of this scenario. 2 field goals, punted it off the returner. Just brilliant decisions all around. The other game that had a fascinating decision that we have to get to is Minnesota. No, sorry, it isn't Minnesota, Detroit. Oh, the other one you haven't seen yet. So, I mean, I don't know if I want to spoil it's one of your favorite coaches. He made a fun decision. He kicked a field goal down 13, inside the 5-yard line in the second half. But I'm not even going to tell you who it was. You're just going to run into this at some point. You've got a couple games that you're still working on.
The other thing, just really quickly too, is at the point that they decided to go for this field goal, Davis Mills was actually playing pretty well. The second half didn't go nearly as well, but especially given CJ Stroud's struggles this year and the fact that Davis Mills has played a lot and actually looked pretty good, if I remember correctly, in preseason this year. I don't know that you could necessarily make the case at the point that they kicked that they were losing a ton. Now, obviously, you're always losing when you go to your backup QB. To say that, I mean, some backup QBs have actually played very well this year. I don't think that probably should factor in maybe as much as it did for him. And maybe it might to some people listening thinking, well, I mean, Davis Mills is your QB. That's a bit of an issue. I mean, it's more of an issue just that Nick Chubb and Woody Marks are your running backs at that point.
Yeah. You got to have a 4th and 1 play. I mean, if it's a QB sneak, whatever it is, you got to be able to have a play that's 1 yard. I don't think you can make suboptimal decisions because you can't call a play to make 1 yard, even if it is your backup QB. I mean, I get it if it's 4th and 5 because you probably have to bring the pass in, but I don't think on 4th and 1, the pass even necessarily has to be a major factor. But no, it's a very fair point. The other game I was going to go to is Minnesota-Detroit, which Tom Brady was on the call for. And Sean, listen, I understand he's a 7-time champ and he's a billionaire team owner and he's the most handsome man in the world and knows more football than everyone in the world. Can someone just tell him to shut up until it's his turn to talk? This guy, like during every single play while Burkhart's trying to call the play and there's stuff happening and he's just the color commentator, like making all these noises in the background. Will you just be quiet? Will you just can they cut his mic? He's doing all these reaction things. Every time a ball's caught, it's it makes him the everyman, like somebody in the crowd. You're the color commentator. Be silent. Have you ever seen those clips of the play-by-play guy and the color guy when they're in the booth and they're showing a big moment and they're showing the way they called the game and sometimes they're up and they're celebrating and everything. The analyst, the second guy is fired up, but he's not talking so that the other guy can call the play. It's insane. It drives me nuts. Brady is constantly making noises. Anyway, Detroit Lions played the Vikings.
I did think it was an aggressive call when he criticized the Jordan Addison non-touchdown early. One of the things that every once in a while grates on you a bit is that every player out there is the greatest player and the greatest human being. And I'm consider myself a fairly optimistic person. I like a positive slant on things, but in certain situations, there's a lack of realism to the call. When Jordan Addison fails to make a very difficult touchdown catch early, we get the Tom Brady call of, man, you got to make that. And I'm like, that's like a 15% catch that Tom Brady thinks you've got to make it, which, I mean, I also kind of felt like it would have been nice. It would have really helped our Jordan Addison score. Then JJ McCarthy look good.
Can we do one more Tom Brady? I in Stealing Signals last week, I went in on Tom Brady, Sean, because he used Jackson Dart as an example for his thing that we talked about this last year on the show. He loves to harp on how they're not developing quarterbacks in systems in the college and high school nowadays. And so quarterbacks don't come in developed. He's talking about how poised Jackson Dart is, and he uses that as a launching off point to go back into these talking points that he's been doing for 2 years about, which, listen, I understand that there's validity to it. He knows way more about this than I do. Jackson Dart's entire thing coming out of the process was that he played in a gimmicky offense and he didn't develop anything. And that's why his numbers weren't real. And he was not considered as high of a prospect as he should have been based on some of his accuracy metrics and all of his athleticism and all that stuff, because he didn't play in a real offense. And Tom Brady's using how quickly he has developed and how poised he is at the NFL level as an example of I don't. You saying that Brian Dable's done a great job with him and all these things, and all I'm thinking is if the player's good enough, apparently he looks poised immediately. It's completely refuting your point. Anyway, what are you going to say about JJ?
Well, no, in Travis Maye on OT back, early in the spring, was talking about how Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss thing, that you could ignore that. Jackson Dart was awesome. And that also, Ole Miss running plays that accentuate their players' strengths shouldn't be held against the players or the coaching staff. That's actually what you want to do as good coaching, good play. And then Dart is good. And so exactly like you're talking about, that is the thing that matters, not whether or not
I mostly just think it's hilarious that he was using Dart as the catalyst for this point. When but yeah,
JJ McCarthy's issue is that he got a lot of time in college handing off to Blake Corum. And so now we're not 100% sure what we have here. And we even have talk that the Vikings more or less tanked last week by playing Carson Wentz just to not show up JJ McCarthy because the third string quarterback is better than he is. Now, that also has kind of a made up tinge to it, especially when he comes back and looks pretty good today. Now, I say he looks good. You know that you've lowered the standard for yourself when you throw for 143 yards and people are like, oh, he's back. But I mean, he did look good. And he looked poised and he looked athletic, and all of those things matter. And he threw some nice passes. Jefferson makes a spectacular catch, and the Lions look bad.
That's how I had everything with McCarthy. I was curious your take on it, and that's how I had the Jefferson one-handed catch was awesome. I mean, it was a McCarthy bullet that needed some touch, and you have Justin Jefferson, so it doesn't matter. He throws a pick that's not on him, where it's a fluky play where Jalen Nailor pins it to his hip, and then the DB Arnold is able to kind of just take it off of Nailor's hip for what goes down for an INT, but it's aided by the wide receiver. At the same time,
probably should have actually just been a reception. It was a tricky one for the officials to call originally, and then once they called it, I think it couldn't really be overturned. But that's a simultaneous possession catch to the offense.
I thought it might have been, it was a really hard one to tell, but I thought it might have been just best judged as incomplete because it does hit the ground and they're kind of both pinning it, but not really. And then it probably becomes control after it hits the ground and just be like, well, they're wrestling for the ball, hit the ground, it's incomplete. Let's just do a different play. But anyway, my argument was that was a tough break, but it was an inaccurate pass. It was one of those tough breaks where, I mean, because he throws it down and behind Nailor and it winds up pinned on Nailor's hip. It's one of those things where, like, McCarthy missing the throw did play a role. Like, that isn't a tough break. It's a tough break, but it's not a tough break that goes against a quarterback who throws a better ball there, is what I'm saying. Like, you sometimes make your own luck kind of a thing. Later, he had a play where he's rolling out. And
Tom Brady thought it was a D throw, in case people are wondering.
Oh, I missed that. I graded it. I love that. Tom Brady does have some good insights. He had a useful point about the tip of the ball that he was throwing being up and causing some issues, and that when you're a quarterback, you want the tip of the ball coming down. And I was like, you know what? That's one of the most insightful things I've heard from Brady. It's just, I mean, he knows how to throw football. Absolutely. I want to hear what he has to say about that.
I mean, isn't the nose down part one of the reasons that, like, Julian Edelman would drop so many passes because the ball was always at his knees?
I mean, maybe, but if it helped him control it better, and I also think there's an element where, like, if it's coming at like a downward trajectory, the drops go to the ground as opposed to like the stuff that gets deflected up in the air for interceptions, you know? Like
Tom Brady won some football games. He probably knows what he's doing.
He probably knows what he's doing. But McCarthy later's rolling out right, and he's trying to make a play down the field, and Justin Jefferson's on the sideline 5 yards downfield because he was kind of the outlet on the play, and he's like, hey, I'm wide open here on the sideline. And McCarthy's like, yeah, I'll get to you. I'm trying to see if I can get like Jordan Addison or somebody downfield. I keep looking. All right, there's nothing downfield. I'm going to come back to you, Justin Jefferson. I'm rolling your direction. I'm rolling out right. You're right there. You're right in front of me. I'm about 10 to 15 yards away from you. Let me throw it to you right now. Oh, crap, I threw it 15 yards over your head. And Justin Jefferson immediately was demonstrative and was like, I mean, it was pretty mild frustration, but it's visible frustration at his quarterback right in front of him.
He did a pretty decent job if you want to look at it from the perspective of after he showed everyone how disappointed he was in the throw, he very quickly throttled it down. It's like, nope, remember, we're not doing that.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you're right. McCarthy played well. I'm saying those are the things that are why you were saying, we're saying that he played well, but you do need the context of it. He only throws 25 passes. He takes 5 sacks, throws a pick on those 25 passes. And yet he did play better than I thought. He played well enough than I expected because of the things you're talking about, because of the rumors about trying to keep Max Brosmer off the field because Max Brosmer is going to show up JJ McCarthy, and they're playing Carson Wentz through, a season-ending injury because they just want to hide JJ McCarthy and all of these things. He comes out there and he plays football well enough that you're like the Vikings can beat the Lions in Detroit. I mean, like that's obviously a pretty good game. Although Brian Flores had Jared Goff in hell in this game. I mean, he was bringing A-gap pressure all day long.
And so Goff also takes 5 sacks. Otherwise, the line looks okay, right? You end up throwing again for almost 300 yards, almost 8 yards per attempt. You throw the 2 touchdowns. Was there an injury in this game? Because
Aaron Jones got banged up.
Ben, Jahmyr Gibbs got close to setting, well, I mean, depends on how you look at it. Best game since going back to Calvin Johnson games. You have the bye, you come out of that, and evidently the takeaway from that was like, let's get David Montgomery involved. Montgomery carries 11 times. He looks terrible. He gets 4 targets. He looks terrible. You can't include those plays when you have, I mean, you were talking about when we were discussing, and you wrote for the CLA Signals subscribers about Jameson Williams, and coming out of the bye, he would probably be more involved. He goes 466 and 1. He makes a sensational catch on what was a very nice Jared Goff throw. Goff, I mean, one of the issues they have is that Goff does have more trouble getting the ball to him than he does to Laporta and Amon-Ra in terms of just what Goff's strengths as a QB are. He throws a very nice deep pass. Williams manages to contort his body to get under it, and then shows crazy body control to tiptoe down the sidelines. But it's not like a tiptoe. It's full stretch, multiple strides. And
the whole time Kevin Burkhardt was trying to call it, Tom Brady's going, oh.
He gets the ball across. They do have to do a little replay there to see that it is a touchdown. So we get that. And then Sam Laporta, looks like rookie year Sam Laporta, looks like second half of last year Sam Laporta. That's the other thing we kind of expected coming out of the bye. Laporta looked fantastic today, almost carried them to the victory. But the other part of it that in no way, shape, or form should be in the game plan at all is David Montgomery out-touching Jahmyr Gibbs unless there was an injury element in this game.
So I think this was because of the A-gap pressure. I think this was a response. Most of it happened late. They were giving their fourth quarter game plan down, whatever it was, 10, was run the ball with David Montgomery. And so Brian Flores from the start of this game is bringing linebackers between the center and the guard, and whatever the Lions project. Obviously, this is something they knew from the film or whatever, but the Lions' entire protection scheme is basically just let these guys run free between the center and the guard, and then Jahmyr Gibbs has to step up and take them on in pass protection. And he does it well at times, but if you're asking your undersized, like 200-pound running back to step up and and the linebackers were like, we're going to blitz so hard and try to blow up the running back every play. If you go back and watch the first half of this game, they're like, we're going to like try to run over Jahmyr Gibbs. We're not even really that worried about getting the sack. Our whole thing is like, we're just going to blow up your entire protection scheme, because the Lions' whole thing is like, we let our running back step up and pick that block up. And I mean, the Vikings are just bringing A-gap pressure, A-gap pressure, A-gap pressure. And then they started to get to Goff because Gibbs was not, I mean, I think he had some pass pro issues in this game. Ultimately, he's a good pass pro play, like back for his size, but he has some issues. And then Goff starts getting happy feet. Like right before halftime, there's a minute left to get the ball back. I think it was second down. He throws a ball that's like nowhere close, and there wasn't even pressure on him. He just looked rattled in the pocket from everything that they were doing to get pressure, and which is you're going to do when you're trying to drop back and read out downfield, and there's guys coming straight up the middle, blowing up your running back right in front of you and sacking you 2 or 3 times and a half.
And it really shows up both the limitations of their offensive game plan, Goff's limitations, and that we sort of arrived at a point in the NFL, and it was a stark contrast to two sides of the ball, right? Because McCarthy still is pretty limited as a passer, but he avoided it. So he takes the 5 sacks, but it could have been a lot worse. He avoids pressure throughout this game and shows a lot of mobility. Jared Goff cannot roll if you have that pressure up the middle that forces him. And it's just, The only two QBs, I'm sure there's a third, but when you watch all day on Sundays, it's striking that the only two QBs who really can't roll are Jared Goff and Joe Flacco. And so the ball just has to come out. And, Joe Flacco's been pretty amazing with it, even in some of these losses. Jared Goff obviously has very good overall results. The Lions are good. The receivers have had good numbers with the exception of Jameson Williams until today. But you just can't find yourself in this situation where David Montgomery is playing a lot when you have the best running back in the NFL. It's one of these things where, again, I don't think that we want to take week one where they were embarrassed by the Packers and say, this is the Lions now. I don't think that we want to take today and say, this is the Lions now. But they also were somewhat non-competitive against the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs kind of reminded us today that they still have plenty of work to do. At a certain point, you're starting to have too many games where if Ben Johnson were the guy there, you'd have more answers.
That's absolutely right. You had to have a different answer. You had to have a different protection scheme. They saw something on film. Brian Flores loves to blitz. We know this. Vikings are number one in blitz rate in the league. They have been all year. They were last year. Like that's what Brian Flores loves to do. And if your entire protection plan on A-gap pressure between the center and the guard, right up the middle, right in Jared Goff's face, is that you're going to let him go between the guard and the center, and you're going to have them, like the guards are always helping toward the tackles, and you're going to have your running back step up and protect. That can't be the whole plan, is what I'm saying. Like you have to fix that at some point. I don't even think – I said Gibbs had some pass pro issues. I don't even think it was really on Gibbs. They were forcing Jahmyr Gibbs to pick something up right up the middle almost every single snap in the first half. And then as you're talking about Jared Goff, just like Flacco, the whole point of or how I think you want to blitz him or how you want to play him is to get him off his spot. You want to make him move because he's not very good once he has to start moving. It's hard for him to roll out and move around. I mean, they made it look easy. Like you just blitz right up the middle and get Jared Goff to move, and they're screwed. Like he's just going to get sacked. He's not mobile enough. He's going to go down eventually if you get him to move, pull the ball down. If
nothing else, you're just going to get a throwaway because he's not someone who can roll and then actually make a pass. It just has to be tossed out of bounds.
Yeah.
So as soon as you make him move, the play is over.
Yeah, exactly. He's so slow. He's going to wind up running it. That's what I was saying. Like it's going to wind up in a sack or a throwaway or something. This was the Vikings defense bullying the Lions offense in a way no one has bullied the Lions offense in 2 years. I mean, that's what I thought this game was, like how it was defined.
Week one, I think, was frustrating in that way as well. But no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think we should note, and I'd be interested if you have a different take, but it probably does matter, at least to an extent, when you're trying to move protections around and figure out how you want to adjust to the successful tactic for the Vikings. That Sewell had his eye scratched in this game and was in and out. And then Taylor Decker leaves late, but you have this combination of Decker has been on the injury report, probably not 100%, and then does get knocked out of this game. So the Lions' elite offensive line, which is a part of their recipe, was not intact for this one.
But those are the two tackles. I mean, their issues were up the middle, man.
Well, I guess I'm just saying that if you have elite tackles,
yeah,
then there are things you can do otherwise that once you don't have elite tackles, now you're scrambling everywhere and you've got to be adjusting out wide as well.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's totally related. But the interior is so fascinating because they had Ragnow retire in the off season, right? And they had Zeitler or however you say it, who left and I think is in Tennessee now or wherever. And I think their whole like interior is different. They moved Glasgow from guard to center. I don't know how their whole offensive line works, but their interior was kind of the concern. And that was clearly what the Vikings were trying to attack. But you're right. It comes back to what you were saying about the Ben Johnson point where it's like, you got to come up with a different plan. They can't just do the same thing to you over and over again. And you're not adjusting or changing your protections, or how do you not have other ideas for protections? I mean, I assume when they play the Vikings again, they will have an entirely different game plan for how to deal with A-gap pressure. But it seemed like it was a real problem for them. And they were like, well, some plays are going to have A-gap pressure, but other plays will be able to cope. And Brian Flores was like, no, I'm just going to bring A-gap pressure all the time. Like, I'm going to do it more than any other coach, which also gets back to the fact that I don't think any other, I mean, for whatever reason, I don't think it's as easy as just calling blitzes as much as Flores does it, or like, I don't think it's like, however his defense is designed is obviously unique to him. I don't think this is an issue that's going to carry over every week for the Lions. I don't think every team can blitz the way a Brian Flores defense can blitz and still cover up on the back end. Because Goff, I think, is pretty good against the blitz, if I'm not mistaken, where he's typically able to get the ball out to the one-on-one or whatever. But the Vikings are doing things complementary on the back end to the blitz that allows them that extra second to get there. Probably the Lions are going to be fine, is what I'm saying. This is probably just a 1 week blip where, I mean, they play at Washington next week, who are going to be, struggling in the secondary, and I saw something that I almost just let slip. Anyway,
well, Ben, as we mentioned this game against the Lions, we're probably not going to go, on too much longer tonight. But this wasn't the only example of an offense that came in absolutely humming. QB looked impeccable. There were actually two QBs that came in much hotter than Jared Goff, who were also completely and totally stymied today. We have the Colts meltdown against the Steelers, and Daniel Jones looks more like the New York Giants version. And then we get a victory because the Falcons still have plenty of work to do on their own offense, but Drake Maye still makes some very nice plays. And the Patriots score 24, they win, but they should have lost this game at home against a pretty weak Falcons team. Now, the Falcons' pass defense is the best part of their roster, but I mean, Maye was on a run, one of these all-time great runs where both the scoring, the stats, and then if you get a chance to watch him every week, miracle throw after miracle throw, where it had been weeks since we saw him miss an open receiver or do anything that didn't seem like the perfect play. And today there were a ton of mistakes, to the point where when they throw on the final play to pick up the first down, the commentators are like, oh, they were gutsy. You're like, you have to throw the ball with Drake Maye right there. Drake Maye has been basically the best quarterback in the NFL this season. It's an interesting game. Yeah. It was cool to see some variety, even though obviously we're rooting for the Colts and have some Maye teams as well, where him continuing that run would have been preferable to not looking particularly good today against the Falcons. The other storyline from that game is that TreVeyon Henderson continued to not score points.
Well, it was tough to. I thought Henderson looked good. Terrell Jennings gets the touchdown, is more of a straight line runner. Henderson winds up with a yards per carry just below 4 yards. He lost 8 yards on a toss play at the end of the game that got blown up, like right as soon as he caught the toss. Without that toss play, and I know people love to say that you can't just take away the best play or the worst play, but like he literally lost 8 yards from like right when he caught the ball. He would have had 63 yards on 13 carries, which is a much better, 4.5 or so yards per carry. Instead, he's at 14 for 55. Caught 4 passes for 32 yards. I thought seemed to be able to run between the tackles and some of those things more than we saw. Because like even like last week when he was really efficient running the ball, it was all toss plays, all on the edge. And he did some stuff inside in this game. Broke a few tackles and after the catch in the passing game. But yeah, he wasn't. It was fun to see him get a little more expansive work for sure. He was the guy that was doing, like, he even got pass blocking assignments, although he got beat around the end on one that moved Maye off the spot and ended up blowing up the play. But he was the guy that was getting like full usage, whereas Jennings was the guy getting like very specific downhill running. This is my specific role. So it was cool to see that they were trusting Henderson with a more expansive role, 6 targets, ties for the team lead. The other side, the other big story for me in this game was, having Penix back, and I talked about it in signals, and I think probably on the show. I'm not sure. No, I definitely talked about it on the show last week because I thought it was one of the interesting things that having Cousins back under center really limited what Atlanta's offense could do. Not necessarily because Cousins is like a way worse quarterback than Penix, but just because of how defenses have to play them. And I didn't think Penix was perfect, especially like the first series. He like tried to dump off to Bijan Robinson twice, and it was sort of absurd. And I think took a sack right away or something. I don't know. They had a quick 3 and out, but he was able to make some of the throws down the field when he needed to. Drake London has the awesome game, 14 targets, 9 catches, 118 yards, 3 touchdowns, one-handed touchdown.
And I'm hoping that when I pull up these rosters, that at the very least, the Brock Bowers, Drake London team will have 200 points.
It's got to be close. That's a lot of points.
They did a lot of the work. Yeah, as you were saying, I'm in London. I'll let you go with it here, but some of the plays that show up in Penix's stat line were sensational catches.
Yeah, great plays. Bijan is the second on the team with 10 targets and 8 receptions. They knew they couldn't really run against the Patriots' strong run D, so they used Bijan out of the backfield more. But Penix has taken a lot of the short passes and running, but just having him, I think, in there, it just changes the whole shape of the offense. Was just mainly the point I was making.
I was just saying there probably is a third QB that can't roll, and probably Cousins would be in that mix. The lack of mobility was somewhat striking a week ago, which, again, we know that Kirk Cousins has had some leg injuries and is old, but you're hoping that with more time to recover, he's going to look a little more sprightly.
Penix isn't going to be like a long-term star or anything, but he's going to be that like 5 years from now, or 6, 7, 8 years, he's going to be like the new Flacco, where he's a backup, but whenever he comes in, you're like, the offense just got so fun. Like all the skill players suddenly start scoring points.
Michael Penix.
Yeah, that's his long-term. That's his future.
That would be fun. I mean, I was about to say that I could still see his tenure with the Falcons ending somewhat rapidly, which is what you're sort of alluding to.
Yeah.
I could also see him being a long-term above average QB, which is probably not enough to get Atlanta where they need to go. One of the problems with some of these guys is just that even if that is your path or your arc or where you end up, sometimes the teams have to go in a different direction simply because you're not good enough and the team isn't good enough. Now, there's a lot more that's going on than just that with Daniel Jones and his resurrection with the Colts, but some of it with the Giants is simply that even though he almost certainly now, and as we were joking a bit about earlier in the week, this idea that he's made Jonathan Taylor, which has some humorous elements to it, but he's playing very, very well in his own right. And obviously the coaching there with the Colts, notwithstanding the meltdown today, absolutely sensational. But part of the problem with his tenure with the Giants is just that the team wasn't good enough. And if you're just a little bit above average NFL QB and the team is terrible, you're not going to look average. And I think that's a little bit where Penix may end up being with the Falcons. And yet, I mean, there's still this possibility that he does go on to be not a star, but someone that if London can emerge. I mean, London's been pretty disappointing this year, but now this is, I believe, the second game where he's looked like a true star. If you could start to stack those a little bit. I mean, Bijan Robinson, I mean, it's a little bit disappointing, I think, for people when he comes in with just the really gaudy scoring levels. That this one here, even a disappointment here when you catch 8 passes, you end up with the game, it's like 17 points, which – that's not going to win the week by itself, but that's a great down game. Bijan Robinson looked like the James Conner from a couple of years ago, where Conner went on that stretch where in like 6 consecutive games, he had a highlight reel one-handed grab that would have been an astonishing catch for a receiver. and Connor was doing it. Bijan Robinson had like 3 one-handed grabs in this game where he just sticks his hand out and stabs a ball that was not targeted well when you think about the short running back passes. This is a fun one. I mean, you can look at it the other way, where if Drake Maye had Bijan Robinson and Drake London, maybe they'd score 50 every week, because I mean, Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry, Stephon Diggs, the sadly washed up version, Austin Hooper, and not playing anywhere, so it doesn't end up being a dagger or anything. But then how does Booty go from like every other week looks like the guy, like the player who is going to make their offense work, to 1 target, 0 catches today?
And why is it that Demario Douglas is the like low-key deep threat? Like, this is their like little slot receiver, Pop Douglas, that was going to be the new Jacoby Myers / new Julian Edelman / new Wes Welker, long line of slot receivers. And he basically was the last 2 years low ADOT guy. And now he's like a rotational deep threat. He's like the like Trey Tucker of this offense. Like, oh, we're going to throw him a couple 50 air yard balls a week, and he catches them. Like, he hit a long TD on a wheel out of the backfield, and then he made another big play on a deep shot. It's sort of like Marvin Mimsy, what the usage is for him. Like, they'll line up in weird spots and try to get him down the field. I guess that's when the names you just listed are all you have. That's what you got to do.
And it is interesting, kind of as you mentioned, that he's not been running the routes, which makes him a trickier guy to try and get in there when you're worried about getting a Booty like score where you get a 0.
Yep.
And yet his athleticism is actually absolutely fantastic. In many ways, this probably makes his tested athleticism, that is, probably makes more sense for him than trying to force him into that other type of role. And man, Drake Maye can drop those passes in. Anybody who's looking at the 259 and 2 with almost 9 yards per attempt and saying, well, that seems fine. What are the complaints? He throws a pick in this one. He fumbles twice. One of those is lost. He's got a lot of fumbles this year. He takes 6 sacks. He's got a lot of sacks. One of the reasons that just the pure passing numbers look good, not good, they look fantastic for Drake Maye, is that on some of these plays, he's got to get rid of the ball and just take the incomplete pass as opposed to sacks, strip sacks, and that type of thing. Again, These are somewhat minor complaints, obviously, within the context of what he's done this season, but you got to get rid of the ball.
Huge play before half. They're up 21-7. They really controlled it. So what I have in my notes on Maye was, I didn't really know how to describe it. I think you're describing it really well, but I wrote, Maye looked great early, but after the fumble before half, he came back and played a pretty poor second half. Was kind of weird. Like, it was some kind of, changed the whole direction of his day. But prior to that, he had hit Douglas for the touchdown. He had hit Douglas on another big play. You're talking about these different, solid stats that he has. All of that was earlier. They had all of their touchdowns in the first half. They scored 3 points after halftime. They were up 21-14.5, but they're up 21-7 with under a minute left. They got to midfield, and Drake Maye, there's like a pressure coming in his face, and he's kind of trying to hold it off and gets the ball stripped, if I'm remembering it correctly. And the defender is able to just pick up the ball and then run for almost a touchdown all the way to the 6-yard line for 27 yards after the ball had rolled a little bit off the fumble. And to your point, like, you're at the 50-yard line, it's 1st and 10, but there's also 30 seconds in the half. You have to get that ball out somewhere. You can't fumble and give them an opportunity at the 6-yard line with 30 seconds. And Atlanta scores. That's where Drake London makes his one-handed catch, if I'm not mistaken, on the sequence of things there. Then they go in at half 21-14 when really New England controlled the first half. Their 4 possessions prior to that were touchdown, punt, touchdown, touchdown. And then that fumble brings Atlanta kind of back into the game. Atlanta had ball first and gone punt, touchdown, punt, downs. And then they get that opportunity at the 6-yard line and score. It's 21-24. And before long, Atlanta has scored a touchdown that would have tied the game, but their kicker misses the extra point. And New England, you mentioned at the top that of this game when we brought this up that Atlanta probably should have won this game. The way the second half went, certainly. And they just, they miss an extra point there. They don't get another opportunity, really. It was very late when Atlanta scores that touchdown. It's inside of 5 minutes remaining. Extra point is no good. They get one more possession after that. Decided to punt because they had gotten pushed back to 4th and 20. They got to around midfield and took a penalty, intentional grounding. Penix. It was a pretty stupid penalty, although I didn't really feel like it was a fair intentional grounding personally.
There were a variety of phantom intentional groundings today, which that's not what we need more of.
No, it's kind of bizarre. They're like really trying to hammer like, well, there wasn't a guy right there. All right, well, we've been letting that go for as long as intentional grounding existed, so let's relax a little bit, guys. Anyway, they punted with about 2 minutes left, and then the Patriots were able to run out the clock. You mentioned they threw on a key third down to get that first down that they needed and be able to kneel out the game and win by 1. But yeah, Maye was really rough in the second half after that fumble right before half, which was really, it was the turning point in this whole game because New England's up 21-7. They're at the 50, like I said. There's 30 seconds in the half. They're going to go kick a field goal, go up 24-7, and get ball at half, up 24-7. And instead, they give the Falcons a touchdown. And now it's a 7-point game at half. And then the whole second half is actually close. I know this because I had the Patriots minus 4.5. I did not win that bet. It shouldn't have been close. They should have won this by like 14 plus.
Yeah, and one of the kind of quiet plays that did seem like maybe it rattled him, even though they run 14 more plays afterward. So again, they ran 14 more plays in the drive to start the third quarter. But he fumbles on that play that you're talking about, which was almost a scoop and score. He also fumbles the first play of the second half and recovers his own fumble. And so back-to-back plays with fumbles there, that's going to, unsettle you a little bit. And then on the second possession of the second half, he throws a pick.
And that was a bad pick, right?
Yeah. Trying to get the ball down to Hunter Henry, had a little bit more of the Jordan Love, Bryce Young kind of look than some of the other passes that we saw today. But again, you get to 7-2. If one of your bad games is a victory, that's what you are looking for. Drake Maye still having a sensational season, and Daniel Jones,
the only reason
the Colts still having a great season as well.
Yeah, the reason we're harping on Maye is because he's looked so good, as you said, and Daniel Jones and the Colts having a great season until today. But same story with them. 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles. I mean, people are going to be like, oh, the old Daniel Jones came out. They were still able to move the ball at times. His turnover issue is probably due to pop up. My notes on it are like, look, he had 2 strip sack fumbles. He had a second half batted pass right to another defensive lineman on the other side. That's one of his interceptions. That's a fluky type of interception. You don't want to get the ball padded. Similar to the point I made on JJ McCarthy. If you get the ball batted, you risk it getting picked off, but that's not always going to work that way. He had a late throw into traffic down 10 when they had to be pushing the ball downfield. That was one of his interceptions. So he ends up with 3. Kurt Warner defended his first one on Twitter. I, in my notes, had it as the one really bad one where he just didn't see the linebacker. Warner's point was that the running back didn't get out to the flat quick enough. The linebacker was manned up on the running back and didn't have to vacate the space that he should have had to vacate. So he's just standing there. Downs runs a little in and out route and is open, beats his man in man coverage. And Daniel Jones comes back, sees that, throws to it. This linebacker that's hovering, that's supposed to be following the running back to the flat, undercuts it, intercepts it. And Warner said something like, you feel for him, for Daniel Jones on that play. Because his player didn't do a good enough job of vacating the space out of the backfield. Like he's doing a chip block and release. I believe it was Abdullah. That's why I keep saying the running back. It may have been Jonathan Taylor. At any rate, he comes back. He throws a ball right to a guy's chest. It looks like a really bad, dumb throw. The one knock on Jones that's always kind of been there is that he does have kind of small hands and he's had fumble issues, and this game was outdoor, and you start to wonder about some of those things. I don't know how any quarterback holds the ball on some of those hits. Like, I don't know how these guys get hit from the blind side and don't always fumble the ball. But yes, Daniel Jones does seem to fumble the ball more than some of the other quarterbacks who are somehow able to hold on to the football. He gets blindsided a couple times, and the ball gets jarred loose both times and recovered by the Steelers both times. I mean, you can't go on the road and beat a team when you turn the ball over, 6 times? Josh Downs also wore a punt off the chest. And 6-1, they lost a turnover battle. You're not going to win the game doing that.
And Downs actually had a very nice game as a receiver. They also had 2 wide receivers go over 100 yards in this game, which they had talked about not having individual guys having had accomplished even in this fantastic offensive season. They opened the game. That Downs mistake was actually pretty huge because they force a 3-and-out, then they go on a 13-play, 79-yard touchdown drive to go up 7-0. They force another 3-and-out, and that's where Downs muffs the punt. And then even though the Steelers don't get in because they go for it at the 4-yard line, the Colts are backed up. Again, this dynamic that we're always talking about. And as a result of that, a 14-play drive, because of where they started, just has them barely across midfield when you get that fumble. And then from that point, the Steelers are kind of off to the races. It's always nice, though, when you have a dynamic offense to where you can really play a catastrophically awful game and still throw for 342 yards. You get a passing touchdown, you get a rushing touchdown. Even with all the turnovers, still a fine fantasy game for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, 368 total yards for the Colts to 225 for the Steelers. 26 first downs for the Colts to 17 for the Steelers. They're 6 for 14 on third downs. They're 5 for 5 on fourth downs. This was the same Colts team we've seen for the most part. When they needed to be efficient on key downs, they have a lot of different ways that they can go to different things and get the ball to different players. You mentioned multiple receivers. Alec Pierce has looked fantastic in this offense the last couple of weeks. It's another sort of key player because they've obviously had Taylor and Warren and then Pittman and then Downs when they've needed him. But Alec Pierce has really come on, has 115 yards in this game. Pittman was the other one. You mentioned Downs has 57 and a touchdown, has a good game. Warren's kind of the afterthought here, but they go to him on some key downs. They get some first downs going to him when they need them. Taylor gets bottled up a little bit as well, and yet they still have answers. It's not like they had a bad offensive game, to your point, and when they needed the things they needed to get to at different times. I mean, Daniel Jones ends up throwing 50 passes in this game, but he still averages way more yards per pass than Aaron Rodgers. 5.7 yards per pass in this one. It's not some amazing number, but the whole thing is, and he took 5 sacks, which impacts that. I'm looking at the team stats, but anyway, they wind up with a good offensive game. To your point, I mean, overall, like it's not a great offensive game with all the penalties and everything, but the penalties kept them with their foot on the gas and they kept moving the ball. They were actually getting into scoring range and those things, just not finishing drives, which is just to say that, you know, sometimes teams lose games and weird things happen or whatever, but you shouldn't be concerned about the Colts offense, I don't think, at all.
It does end up taking Jonathan Taylor out of the game. On the other side of it, Jaylen Warren gains 29 yards, but I believe scored 17 fantasy points. He catches a couple passes and scores a couple touchdowns. It's not really that relevant, but it was sort of amusing today, Ben, that it seemed like the game plan from the Steelers was to get Darnell Washington involved, which is a game plan that works a lot better when your opponent commits 6 turnovers. The Steelers were still pretty amusing in this one. Freiermuth gets in the end zone, which we like Pat Freiermuth, so that was fun, if a little bit irrelevant. Yeah, the Steelers, seeing that Baltimore Ravens game on Thursday, were like, let's use some Mike Tomlin magic, win this game in whatever way works out, which was by the defense that had hemorrhaging yards and points to this juncture.
And they still hemorrhaged yards, but they managed to not hemorrhage points.
So this was outside of the Bowers eruption. there maybe weren't quite as many huge notes from this week as there have been in a few others, but this was another fascinating Sunday, another week in a season where so many weeks have featured cool football and even some of the bad games. Interesting storylines. Really loved watching the games today. Certainly loved.
Yeah, there's been more points this year. There's been more it's felt at times like there's been more blowouts, and we've talked about some of that stuff, but when the games do go back and forth, because some of the tactics that we've talked about where teams are willing to go for it on fourth more and make some of these more aggressive decisions to actually try and go and win games, you get these really fun atmospheres when it does come together, and both teams are playing to win instead of like punting in a weird spot. And you're like, it just kind of took away some of the drama here. It's been fun, man. The Bears-Bengals 5-point game, Vikings-Lions 3-point game, Packers-Panthers, as bad as that game was, still a 3-point game. You mentioned the Panthers are 5-4 now. I was going to say their first win, they blew out the Falcons, but since then, 4 straight one-score wins, 3 of them by exactly a field goal. That's a team that if you want to get ahead on your Python, Gen, Pat, whatever, research for 2026, it's all going to tell you that they're going to have fewer wins next year than this year because all their losses have been basically blowouts. I think they have 1 loss that they've been close. Chargers Titans was a 1-score game. Patriots Falcons 1-score game. I mean, so many Steelers Colts we just talked about 1-score game. Broncos Texans 3-point game. Jags Raiders go to overtime, decided by 1 point with a 2-point conversion try at the end. So many of these close games. It was a fun week for that. I mean, some of them were a little bit lower scoring this week. We've been talking about the higher scoring games. It was nice to see some of that a little bit too. I mean, not preferred necessarily, but mostly nice for me because I like the over-unders rose this week, Sean, and I want to keep betting the overs. And so I'm glad that they may not continue. Like, we need the points to balance out a little bit so that, people think that they can bet unders again. So I can keep betting the overs because I do think the points are here to stay longer term with the way that the sport is kind of structured right now. But fun week 9.
Yeah, fantastic. Congratulations, Brock Bowers. Good luck, everybody, on Monday night. This has been your Sunday night stealing bananas. I'm Shawn Siegele. As always, has been Gretch. Make sure you are over there with Stealing Signals, bengretch.substack.com, including some of the other features Ben talked about. Additional articles each week beyond the the incomparable Monday and Tuesday articles. I've been writing the banana stand. It's always fun. We'd love to have you guys over RotoViz. Coupon code RRated2025 at checkout for 10% off your 1-year sub. Ben and I may be doing either a few one-off in-week shows or maybe some other types of things. We'll let you guys know. Keep an eye out. Subscribe to the feed. That will get you these shows when they come out. Then we'll have to see what the meltdowns from Dan Campbell and Shane Steichen mean for where they finish in our coaches draft that we've been referencing. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.